Eggs. They come in a variety of different sizes, and they're the first stage of life. But have you ever wondered why they're shaped the way they are? The circular shape of an egg is also designed for strength. An egg is less likely to break when a force is applied from the outside, as opposed to forces applied from within. This is why it's easy for a little chick to break out of an egg than for something to break into the egg. Eggs are hatched by an adult bird sitting on top of them. The best shape for round eggs is a cup-shaped nest, which will prevent them from rolling around. So basically, the best shape for eggs is for one end to be smaller than the other. The normal position for eggs in a nest is to have the smaller ends pointing inwards. This means the eggs take up less room, and it makes it easier for the sitting bird to cover them. Seabirds often build their nests on a cliff face. If the egg is caught by the wind on a rocky ledge, it will tend to spin around, as opposed to rolling off the cliff edge. As the eggs are forming inside the bird, its layers are applied as it spirals down the oviduct canal. This spiralling motion creates a round-shaped egg. If you take a close look at the chicken egg, you'll notice that one end is larger than the other. The broad end contains an air cell, which is located at the top end of the inner shell. As the chick is hatching, it will use this air cell to breathe. I've still got one question though. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
There you go, Tim. Roll us once more with one of his journeys into science.
The thigh bone's connected to the hip bone's connected to the... I had a feeling you were there. That's rather embarrassing, isn't it? Sorry about that. Just having a little bit of a sing to myself, and while I'm doing that, I may as well talk to you about our skeletons. Now, our skeleton serves lots of different functions for our bodies. It helps give it form and structure. It also allows our body to move. And another thing it actually does is protect our bodies as well. Coming up past the ribs here now, these ribs actually protect the soft organs, the tissues underneath. And if we go even higher into our skull here, this skull protects our brain from injury as well. So they can serve quite a few great different functions. The biggest bone, by the way, is this bone sitting here. It's called our femur, or the thigh bone. It's the biggest bone in your body. Inside of your ear, just up here, is the smallest bone in your body, the tiniest bone. And this is actually called the stirrup. It's the smallest bone in the human body. Now, there's one other function, of course, our bones have, and that is to allow us to actually be able to move. And this works around joints. Our bodies have got lots of different types of joints, and that's what we're going to talk about now. We'll leave our friend the skeleton for just a second and come round to the table. Now, there's a couple of different joints I can talk about here, some which give us movement and some which allow us a little bit of movement, and others which don't allow us any movement at all. The first one we need to talk about is a hinge joint. A couple of blocks of wood here and a hinge, and you'll see that this works like so. I can open this up very, very easily to about that point, and then I can close it up. Now, these two blocks of wood are actually the bones of our skeleton, and this hinge joint here is actually representing the point at which those two blocks meet, or the hinge joint in our arm or legs, or actually our fingers as well. So, hinge joint sits about here. I can close my arm, and I can also open my arm up. I can't go any further than that, though. And another thing I can't do is actually twist this arm through in that direction. We can do that with another joint that's actually further up my arm, and this is a ball and socket joint, and this allows movement in a great big circle like so, something that a hinge joint can't actually do. Now, a hinge joint works a little bit like this guy sitting down here. All I've got is a light bulb and also the mortar part of a mortar and pestle. Now, what happens is you need to actually imagine, sorry, before I explain this, you need to imagine that there's a skeleton coming out here, and there's also another bone coming out here. So a bone at the top and a bone coming down here, which makes up part of our skeleton. And we can actually move that around like so, which gives us movement in a very big range of directions. So that works like the ball and socket joint up here, or through here in our pelvis as well, which means we can move our leg around. Now, here's another joint which allows us a little bit of movement, but not a huge amount of movement. And this is our vertebrae. Now, we've got two bones, two vertebrae here. In between, though, we've got this spongy material. Now, this spongy material we call cartilage. And this cartilage actually protects the two bones between there from wearing away at each other. We've also got some synovial fluid in there which provides us with a little bit of lubrication as well. And these two rubber bands act as ligaments to hold the two bones together across that joint. So all very, very important stuff. We can put that down for just a second. Now, cartilage you'll find in other places of your body as well, not just between the joints. One place is up here in your ears, and another place you'll find it is actually in your nose as well, just at the tip of your nose. And we can get rid of that profile right now. Another place where you'll find joints is actually in your head. And this is where we get joints that allow no movement whatsoever. In fact, they're a little bit like this. They work like a jigsaw. Now these joints here, we've got a little bit of movement there, but what happens is these two joints will fuse as you get older and older and older. They start off as bones in your head. So we're talking about the cranium now, your head. And the cranium starts off with 8 bones, which slowly join together, and eventually they will fuse and become one bone. But just as they're joining together, they form a joint a little bit like this one here. So let's go back to our body, our skeleton that's sitting over here, and have a look quickly again at those joints. Down here, of course, in our leg, we've got that hinge joint. We've also got one of those in our arm here as well, at the elbow. Now, just coming back from there, we've got this ball and socket joint, which allows us lots of movement in lots of different directions. And we've also got that up here at the top of our arm there as well, another ball and socket joint. The vertebrae are just back here. Now, each vertebrae can only move just a little bit, but in combination with all of those vertebrae, they can allow us a lot of movement. So we can move our back forward, and we can move our back all the way back like that and have a great big yawn. Very cool. And those joints in the head, well, this is where we've got them all fused at the moment, this line that runs along there. So they've become one bone. We don't really see much of that joint anymore. So lots of different joints in our bodies, which allow us lots of different movement. Now, this guy's looking a little bit old here at the moment, so I think he probably needs a bit of oiling. I think I'll just add a bit of synovial fluid to a couple of his joints.
Looks like you're boned up on that subject, David. The world is a colourful place, but do you know how we see colours? Give it some thought, ask someone, look it up, but you better be quick because I'll be back with the answer in a short while, just after this break. See you.
We have things called colour receptors. They are sensitive to a large range of frequencies or colours, but cannot tell whether the light is black and white or colour. They can only tell how intense it is. We have 3 types of colour receptors. Each has maximum sensitivity to a different frequency or colour, red, blue or green. Our brains interpret the relative intensities from each of these receptors as a single colour, which is an average of all the different signals. Now, Jessica Beaton of Mount Gravatt, Queensland, has written in to ask, what is a tree doctor? So Lisa, who has a soft spot for trees, took to the woods to find out the answer.
When we're sick, we'll visit the doctor. When the family pet's sick, we'll take them to the vet. But when a tree's sick, a tree doctor comes to visit them? Are you sure? Guess we'd better go check it out then. Belinda, why do trees need a tree doctor?
Trees need a tree doctor because tree doctors are actually trained in what is actually good for trees. They know how to prune trees correctly in order that the infections and bacteria that are floating around in the air have least path to get into the tree and to actually make it sick. So that's one of the most important reasons that trees actually need a tree doctor. We find that people like to build right beside a tree, and therefore there are quite often cases where roots and things are cut to an extent where the tree may either fall over or just be completely dangerous. And we find that once a tree's root system is cut, a lot of people then call us and say, I've got a problem with my tree, it's looking sick. So what we try and encourage people to do is get us involved with the planning processes, which actually combats a lot of those stresses that are put on trees. So with some good planning, we can actually find that more trees can be retained in the suburban landscape.
So Belinda, how do you treat a sick tree?
There's many ways that you can treat a sick tree, but one of the best things is actually prevention. And what we find is that if we mulch under trees, like you see here, and this actually appears quite dry, but what I'll do is scrape this back, and you can see how nice and moist. Mulching trees is really wonderful. It's an environmentally friendly practice because not only does it reuse the wood, but it's also good for the soil, and it's good for the fungus to get in there and help the roots. See, there's a nice healthy root there that you can see.
And obviously if your tree's looking a little sick, you should call a tree doctor.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's good to call as soon as your tree does start to look a little bit off colour rather than waiting until it is like really, really sick before you ring. We find that sometimes people go, oh, it started to look a bit sick last spring, but we thought we'd wait and see if it got over it. And of course, by the time you get there, the poor thing's absolutely gone, yes, and there's very little you can do. So if you have a favourite tree, or if you have any trees at all, and you do notice that they're looking a bit sad, then please give somebody a call, but just make sure that whoever you call knows what they're doing. That's the most important thing of all.
I think being a tree doctor would be heaps of fun. Don't you think I'll make a good tree doctor? It's okay, fella. You'll be better by tomorrow.
I think that one will have you stumped, Lise. Thanks to Belinda Tom for the expert advice on that story. Alrighty, David's up now with some fun stuff.
Time for today's fun stuff, and today's fun stuff is really fun, but it's also a little bit dangerous. So I've got my my safety goggles on already, and I've got the chemical reaction that I'm going to be doing down the other end of the table here, because basically what I've done is prepare an explosive. Now, explosives, of course, can be very dangerous. Now, with this particular explosive, all I have to do is put a little bit of energy into it simply by touching it with a feather, touching that mixture of chemicals with a feather. That's going to put enough energy into this system to make it explode and release lots and lots of energy. Now, the main way that this chemical reaction is going to release energy is in the form of sound. So we're going to hear something which is actually quite loud. Now, explosives, of course, can be very dangerous, and they can be set off simply by touching them. So anything that may look like an explosive, don't go anywhere near it, and certainly don't touch it like I'm about to do very carefully with the explosives down the end of this table. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Whoa! There we go. Puff of purple smoke, and that's what I call fun stuff.
That experiment certainly went off with a bang. Later on in the show, Joseph tilts at trains. Brad finds out that not all birds fly. Leichhardt, New South Wales has heard of a tilt train and wanted to know what one was. So Joseph went down to the station and conducted an investigation.
By all accounts, this is a pretty modern looking train. It's got a slick aerodynamic design, plush interiors and state-of-the-art entertainment and global positioning systems. But it's what's going on down on the tracks that really gives this train the edge.
The tilt train technology has been in existence since 1973, when it was developed in Japan. The reason for inventing the tilt train was to enable trains to travel faster around corners by actually tilting into the turn. It's quite similar to the motions of a motorcycle as it turns corners. However, unlike the present design of tilt trains where computers control the tilt, the older trains had a natural tilt, which was made possible by the use of rollers. These rollers allowed the train running along a curve to spontaneously tilt inward due to the centrifugal force. Despite this concept being quite innovative for the time, the designers and engineers found that travelling on the train felt too much like going on a ride. These factors brought about the development of the modern tilt train.
This tilt train runs between Brisbane and Rockhampton in Queensland. It used to take older trains 9.5 hours to make this journey, but travel time has now been reduced by up to 3 hours. It has a maximum allowable speed of 170 kilometres an hour. And all this can be accredited to the fact that the train tilts when it turns corners. But how?
Unlike the original spontaneous tilting design, today's tilt train operates by a computer-controlled tilt system. A command controller unit in each terminal and cabin is loaded with track data for the entire journey. The controller unit then instructs the amount of tilt on each vehicle by monitoring the speed of the train and its location data. All this is supplied by magnets on the track. The tilt controllers also monitor the valves which supply oxygen to the tilt cylinders on each wheel assembly. A maximum angle of 5 degrees can be achieved on each tilt.
You might think that because this train tilts, you'd have to hang on to your hats, but it's actually a smooth ride all the way. This high-tech train cost around $113 million, including making alterations to the railway tracks. Well, now that we know all about tilt trains, I guess there's nothing left for me to do but sit back and enjoy the ride.
Tickets, please.
Some things haven't changed.
Thanks, Joseph, for putting a different slant on train travel. A good story, well conducted. David's making noises on his side of the studio. Let's see what he has for us now.
Did you realise that the Earth is made up of a great big mass of plates? Well, not exactly like my paper friend here, but great big masses of Earth. Now, these masses of Earth are actually moving around, very, very slowly, mind you. But let's have a look at the Earth as it sits today. Let's have a look at all the continents. We've got a map sitting down the front here, of course, Australia, just down here, and just above that, we've got Europe and Asia. We've also got Africa, then North America and South America over here as well. So we've got all these continents. Now, these continents and these land masses actually extend beneath the surface of the ocean as well. Now, the Earth is made up of around about 8 massive plates, and these plates are constantly moving and shifting around over a layer of hot molten magma. And what happens is, as these shift around, they'll grind against each other, and they'll also butt up against each other, and they'll pull away from each other as well. And this is how we end up with formations of land and also some earthquakes as well. Let's have a look over here at this map. Now, this may not look as immediately recognisable as the map we looked at a second ago, but it's got all the same elements here. We've got Europe and Asia up here. We've also got North America and South America and Africa and Australia down here, but India's down in a very, very strange place. It's not attached to where it should be, where we recognise it as being. This is because this is the way we believe that the Earth actually started out. Something called Pangaea, this great big mass. But we still had these continents here, these great big masses of land, these tectonic plates, we like to call them. And what happened is, over time, we ended up with something called continental drift. The continents drifted away from each other, and India drifted in this direction here. So we've got India coming around here, and it actually drifted around until it butted up into here. Now, where it hit this other landmass, then what happened was we threw another range of mountains up into the air. A little bit like so. You can imagine it using this, this box and these 2 pieces of paper. What happened is these 2 continents drifted in together, and as they did, this landmass rose, which of course we call the Himalayas, which rises up the top there. Not exactly as spectacular as the Himalayas, but I think you get the point. Also, underneath the sea, where these tectonic plates actually meet, what can sometimes happen is hot molten magma can start spewing out there as well, and again, we'll get these massive mountain ranges forming underneath the ocean. Now, of course, that's one situation. Sometimes we get these grinding across each other, these massive plates grinding across each other, or actually shifting underneath each other as well. And that's what's happening around here along California. There's something called the San Andreas Fault, and that's where one plate is actually moving underneath the other plate. And as it does that, it causes massive earthquakes. So this continental drift can cause earthquakes, it can cause mountains to rise, and it can cause all sorts of other land mass forms to form as well. So hope you've caught my drift and maybe learnt something as well.
Birds can't fly. This one ruffled Brad's feathers, so he took off to get the goss.
This is a magnificent bird when in flight. Unfortunately, it's not flying at the moment because it's not alive. But there are some birds that don't fly even when they are alive. Isn't that right, Steve?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
And you've got some amazing specimens here in the Search and Discovery section at the Australian Museum. Now, can you tell me the difference between birds of flight and birds that don't fly?
Okay, well, first of all, we're going to start off having a look at those birds that fly, such as the one we have in front of us. And the major difference is, if we could look underneath this bird, underneath the wings, there would be a very, very big muscles. In fact, up to 40% of the body weight can be the muscles under the wings that make them flap up and down.
Wow.
And that creates, if we look over here, a very, very big keel on its sternum or its breastbone that the muscles have to attach to. Now, that's for flighted birds.
Mm-hmm.
For birds that don't fly, well, most of them, they simply have this bit smoothed off. So there isn't the need for big muscles to be attached to flat wings, therefore it's simply a nice flat sternum area. That's equivalent of the middle of our chest area for us.
Okay. Now, on this one you've got the keel because it flies, so does that aid it in flight?
It's not so much it aids it in flight. You can see when we go back to the bird itself that there's no actual direction got from the keel. It's mainly to support the muscles that it uses to flap. So it would be like the pectoral muscles on us. Now, there are some non-flighted birds that actually have these keels. Can you guess which ones?
I would say the penguin.
Now, very good. Okay, the penguins, they don't actually fly, but they do have the keel to attach the very, very big muscles. And that's because they're like they're flying underwater. They're like flippers. They need the same structure to fly. There's other differences in the penguin. They're very, very tight, waterproof feather structure. They've got more of flipper-type legs, and they're great for moving underwater.
All right, well, the question is, why are there some birds that can fly and some that can't?
Okay, it really comes down to the environment they live in. If it proved that it was actually better for these birds to actually run after their food, or like our friend behind us, the cassowary, these birds don't actually need wings in their environment, and eventually they're going to adapt to the point where their wings take up less and less of their body mass, or they get smaller and smaller because they're just wasted if they don't need them. And things like their legs become very big and strong in the main form they move around.
Right. Could it also possibly be because birds like the cassowary don't have to migrate like other birds do?
Some people might think that, and there are examples like the kiwi, that probably a New Zealand kiwi, that wouldn't migrate too far. It's a short little bird. But and the cassowary as well, because it lives in restricted areas of rainforest. But things like emus, they actually move hundreds and hundreds of kilometres across desolate areas, so they do migrate to wherever the food is.
Well, thanks very much, Steve, for explaining the difference between a bird of flight and a flightless bird. And I might just sort of flop one out of here myself.
Okay.
This is why I don't fly.
Brad, that story with a